We have, yeah, right here.
Oh, I was wondering if you are totally comfortable with the idea. The dust that came off from these explosions is finer than anything that's ever been recorded from what I've heard. And I was wondering, in addition to these the controlled demolition that brought down the towers, have you analyzed the cells of this dust to see if, well, I've heard of HARP technology, if there was any other type of technology in addition to that that was involved?
Okay, okay, first of all, the pulverization of the dust has been looked at by, in Gordon Ross's paper. He talks about that a bit. See, as you can see, I'm looking for specific elements and metals. And the pulverization size, I don't have a great deal of comment. I remember Tom Cahill at UC Davis mentioned that the particulates coming off, this is now after a collapse, he's looking at those, were very small, abnormally shifted, in other words, towards the fine particulates. So there has been some observation of that. But that's a little different because that's after the collapse. I don't know of anyone who's looked at that from the dust from the collapse. It's certainly a good thing. Now, one thing I have done is I did send, I've asked an independent lab to look at the fine dust compared to the coarse material and compare the contents. So that's sort of addressing your question. But I realize from the second part of your question, there's more to it. You're talking about, as someone else asked me earlier, Dr. Wood says maybe there's a beam of laser or microwave from space or something that came down, and she says instead of thermites. Well, I'm saying, look, there's a lot of evidence for thermite, and on the other hand, some exotic laser or maser beam. I'm one that's open to suggestion, but boy, there better be some pretty good evidence, you know. And I haven't, it looks to me like the thermite explanation fits the data quite well, and so that's where I stand on that. But plus the fact that it takes a lot of energy. If you're sending a beam of laser from space, you've got to have an enormous energy source in space to do that. And that's been looked at. It's tough. It's a tough problem. It's almost ruled out there. I don't think we have such a weapon, thank goodness.
We have another question up here, and then we'll come back down there.
Hi. I noticed when you described the situation with the World Trade Center, you talk of 3 buildings, building 1 and 2. I've got a German site that I looked at, and it says that at the same time that the building 2 fell, there was an explosion in building 6, which blew out the center 8 floors. Also, the next day, WTC-3, the Marriott Hotel, exploded in the same manner. So I thought that in relation to your talk, it would be good to not just limit it to just those 3 buildings, but to realize that this looks like a whole plan for the whole center. And okay.
You know, building 6, you're right, is very curious. As you look at the aerial photograph, which I could go back to, there's a big hole in the center of building 6, and there needs to be more study on that. I agree with you there. Until that study is done, I don't, in other words, we have the right to reserve judgment. That's the same thing I do at the Pentagon, would hit the Pentagon. Until we get more data, I'm reserving judgment. I don't think it was a missile, by the way, personally, from the data I have seen that hit the Pentagon. I do want to see data. I'm just a guy that likes hard evidence whenever I can get it, video evidence, if,
Okay. So we'll take a couple more questions.
Oh, he's doing the mic. Are you doing the mic? Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Dr. Wood's investigation also reveals that much of the towers became dust, not just the concrete but the steel. And thermite cuts through steel. It doesn't explode and turn steel. and concrete to dust. She did it using the seismic evidence. How would you explain that?
Well, now, let's look at the data again. You're saying that much of the steel turned to what was evaporated. Can you give me evidence for that? I don't know of the evidence. In fact, I don't believe. The seismic signal will not tell you. Yeah. Well, that doesn't mean that the steel was turned to dust. I mean. Oh, now that's an interesting statement, but it needs to be demonstrated to me. I mean, you can't just say that. In other words,
Okay.
I've looked at her side.
We have another question here, so you can carry on your conversation with Dr. Jones after the session, and you can debate with him at that point.
Yeah, I do have one quickie, though, on that. She also talks at her side about, look, the calculations need to be done more. But the other thing is the cars, which I talked about, those look very much like thermite for the reasons I explained. She says that's a laser beam hitting things, or a maser. But no, that would not account for the pockmarks in the plastic and the corrosion in the steel like thermite does. So really, I think that already the thermite explanation is much better. Plus, she needs an energy source for her high energy weapon and some place where it exists. I'm sorry, we need more data to support that. And the same thing with no planes hitting the towers, which Judy Wood supports. I do not support that because there's great evidence, including the swaying of the second tower, the south tower, as it was hit, and the debris, you see. I mean, there's all these evidences. I'm sorry, I find myself in disagreement with Judy Wood on those points, for the reasons mentioned.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deborah Yanez, and my brother-in-law was stationed to go to New York to help in the cover-up, and he's a Moose Freemason who also was wanting to go to Iraq to kill the people there. And after they took him there, he was shipped off to Iraq to help in the medic team, but he ended up using weapons to help kill the people. And I was wondering if any of you people have like relatives who belong to the Freemasons, and people are in the cover-up or people in the military that who have now looked at all these things and realized that there's a lot of blinders, and if there's any type of police group that are being outspoken about these things and trying to come forward on some of the evidence that they've found themselves and help cover up.
That's basically a request, which, let me just say, I'll just put this here, you can read it. There are many anomalies related to 9/11 that need to be pursued. Thank you.
We had time for one more question here.
Professor Jones, would you say that the energy released by thermite and possible cutting charges would be enough to cause large structural members to be flung as far as 300 or 400 feet away from the building? And if not, then what would account for that?
Well, explosives would. Remember super thermites, the finely powdered form of the thermite, is explosive. It's very high energy density, and it is explosive. And one of the reports I saw said it compares favorably with the conventional monomolecular explosives. This is not monomolecular, obviously, but when it's finely powdered, it will explode and do the same effect, hurling these beams horizontally, which, by the way, is very important evidence for explosives.
Unfortunately, we're running over schedule right now, so we have to limit some of the questions.